want to talk about the roles for just a second. Do you feel like a lot of the Asian roles that you were going out for, were they stereotyped?
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, definitely. I would need to like nerd myself up or like, they're like, can you do an accent? And it's like, I don't want to.
Did you ever go into auditions for Asian roles and look around and see white people?
Oh yeah. A lot of the roles that I went out for, they ended up that were Asian, they ended up being white. And I think that happens all the time. When I first was, auditioning for roles and going out, for different characters in LA, I was going out for Asian roles and then just for roles that weren't scripted in for any particular ethnicity, and all the comments were always, you're not white enough to be the lead and you're not Asian enough for this part.
This is Chloe Bennett, most famous for playing the superhero Quake on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And in that clip, she's referring to how she had to change her name in order to book jobs in Hollywood. See, she wasn't born Chloe Bennett, but rather Chloe Wang. In an Instagram post, she said, "Changing my last name doesn't change the fact that my blood is half Chinese, that I lived in China, speak Mandarin, or that I was culturally raised both American and Chinese. It means I had to pay my rent, and Hollywood is racist and wouldn't cast me with a last name that made them uncomfortable." In another interview, she admitted that the first audition I went on after I changed my name, I got booked. Chloe Bennett erasing her cultural identity for the sake of appeasing a racist industry is emblematic of a culture that has made white the norm, and she is far from the only person that has done so. In fact, let's play a game. Here are a bunch of extremely famous celebrities. You go ahead and count how many of them you recognize. Stumped? All of these examples are the original names of many famous celebrities who have chosen to whitewash their name. Peter Jean Hernandez is now known as Bruno Mars. Vera Minnie Callingham is now Mindy Kaling. Ramon Estevez and Carlos Estevez, now Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen. Farrokh Bulsara, Freddie Mercury. Natalie Hirschlag, Natalie Portman, and Krishna Pandit Banji is now known as Ben Kingsley. All of these celebrities have, at one point or another, admitted that they either wanted white America to accept them, or that their ethnic-sounding names have caused trouble with racism in the past. As writer for The Guardian, Arwa Madawi puts it, often they will just say something along the lines of, they changed their name to make it simpler. But simpler is often code for more marketable to white people. This behavior goes so far to show how aggressively people of color have been pushed to the periphery. People of color, or POC for short, is just an umbrella term meant to describe anybody that isn't white, which by the way is not the same thing as colored people, because that's, super racist. Representation for people of color has always been a contentious area of controversy in Hollywood, dating back to the most obvious and the most egregious offense, blackface. Now, has POC representation gotten better since then? Of course it has. Nobody runs around in blackface anymore. Well, much. But to say that the problem has been solved is woefully simplistic and quite frankly dangerous. And the problem isn't so much racist portrayals of stereotypes, which, yes, does still happen, but it's the subtle erasure of people of color from the spotlight. Let's say you're casting for a new movie and you're looking for a new lead actor. What race do you want your lead actor to be? If you just said to yourself, why does it matter what race he is, then congratulations, you're less racist than Hollywood is. Obviously, if it's a story where race is crucial to the plot, then you cast that race, but more often than not, the race shouldn't matter. And yet, they're overwhelmingly white characters. This graph by Statista shows how many characters in the top grossing films were of different ethnicities. In any given year, Latin American representation accounted for 3 to 5% of the cast, Asian representation was also at 3 to 5%, Black representation was between 11 to 15%, while white representation was at a staggering 73 to 77%. White characters absolutely dominate the cinematic arena, leaving very little room for other ethnicities. Now, the graph also shows otherworldly characters, which are characters of non-human origin, like aliens or elves, monsters, etc. Otherworldly representation accounted for 0 to 3% of the total census, which means that it is literally only marginally less rare for a Latin or an Asian character to appear on screen than a monster. Slavery in America is a black story. Mexican drug cartels is a Mexican story. But action, romance, horror, these are human stories, not tethered to any one race, and yet Hollywood still casts white characters. The message this is sending is clear. White is the norm, and people of color are simply narrative tools for white characters to develop their own narrative arc. Minorities are treated as the other. Okay, great, so we've established that Hollywood hates people of color. Fantastic. Why does that matter? Well, say hello to Kenneth and Mamie Clark. Kenneth and Mamie Clark were two psychologists based in New York City that conducted the infamous doll tests. They placed white and black dolls in front of a group of African American children and asked them questions like, give me the doll that you like to play with, give me the doll that looks bad, and give me the doll that looks like a colored child. What they found is that a majority of them showed a preference for the white doll, as much as 2/3. By the time the final request came around, give me the doll that looks like you, the children had already established that the black doll was bad, and so they were reluctant to admit that they looked like it. Some said they looked like the white doll, and some of them even flat out refused to pick one and ran out of the room crying. Although this experiment was done to make a point about segregation and actually played a pivotal role in Brown vs. Board of Ed, I think it goes a long way in showing just how young children have to be in order to start internalizing racism. After all, racism isn't inherent, it's learned. No baby comes out of the womb wearing a MAGA hat. Racist tendencies have to be instilled in us through our environment. For those kids, that mindset was instilled in them through segregation and discrimination, but today, that mindset is instilled in kids with this.
Excuse me, do you like Asian men? No. Thank you. You like Asian men? I don't even like Chinese food, boy.
And this.
Is that your little impression of me? Why are you fronting on me? I ain't talking like you, I'm talking like my damn self.
And this.
Kelly, how are you?
I just had the longest meeting.
Oh, welcome to my convenience store. Would you like some googie?
We're essentially teaching our children that people of color are outsiders. We're destroying childhoods and creating a breed of children that thinks it's okay to view minorities as the other. And this behavior can fester into adulthood too. In 2014, co-founder of dating site OkCupid, Christian Rudder, published a blog post that compiled user data to show racial preference among users. This data showed clear evidence that African American females and Asian males were the least likely chosen partners for most users by a pretty wide margin, while their white counterparts were by far more desirable. But it's just a preference, I can't control who I fall for. And you're right, nobody's calling you racist just because you lean towards a specific race as far as attraction goes. But you should know that what you find attractive isn't inherent to you. Nobody is born thirsting after six-packs or blonde hair. Who and what you find attractive is something taught to you by your environment. And if your environment is constantly giving the attractive character roles to white people, while Asians still get cast as the awkward, sexless nerd, and black women still get cast as the sassy, aggressive, independent woman, then maybe you're gonna start believing that too. But Joseph, I hear you say, it's getting better. Didn't you watch Crazy Rich Asians? Yes, naysayer, I did. And it was great. And I'm not just saying that because it bolsters my argument, it was genuinely an objectively competent and enjoyable movie. But that is one movie out of the dozens of movies that came out in 2018. Crazy Rich Asians was a phenomenal movie, sure, but I'm actually a lot more interested in another movie that also came out this year.
Look into her behavior also.
She gets a fake ID. I know my daughter. This is her keychain.
She was my best friend. You broke his jaw.
I know my daughter.
I'm trying to help you find my daughter.
I didn't know her. I didn't know my daughter.
Searching is a movie about a father desperately searching for his missing daughter. That is a human story. Black Panther was a film set in Africa, so that's a black story, so they cast black talent. Narcos is about the cocaine trade in Colombia, so that's a Latin story, so they cast Latin talent. Crazy Rich Asians is a story about, well, so of course the cast has to be Asian. All of these movies use a character's race as a narrative tool to advance the plot. Change these characters' ethnicities and you have a fundamentally different story. But Searching has nothing to do with race. This movie wouldn't have changed in the slightest if they decided to cast a white family or a black family, and yet they chose to cast an Asian family. This is what I want to see more of. So far, Hollywood has basically been saying that minorities only deserve to be in the spotlight if the script calls for their specific race. Now, it would be irresponsible of me to ignore all the progress we've made, because positive representations have been getting better over the past couple years. Just look at The Good Place. This is a show where the mindless drug dealer is Asian, the moral philosophy professor is black, and the sexy bombshell is Indian. It absolutely breaks convention, and it's a phenomenal show. Movies and shows like these help to normalize minorities, showing people of color as normal humans with normal human problems. This fantastic article by Mashable writer Angie Han completely dismantles any argument against POC casting. Sometimes Hollywood claims that their movie is a universal story, not tied to any race, which is fine. But as Angie Han says, why would every man default to white? The assumption here seems to be that only people of color have race, while white serves as a totally neutral default. Then there's the argument of, why do we need non-white people in this? Which, again, means you're making white the default and saying that people of color had to be specifically called for. Then there's the argument of, but we hired the best person for the job regardless of race. Which, like, who better to cast for the role of an ethnic character than a person of that ethnicity? But by far, the biggest argument against casting people of color in Hollywood is that filmgoers simply wouldn't want to watch a movie with a relatively unknown actor, which is what most POCs tend to be. Hollywood says they want to make a buck, and they can't do that if they cast minorities. Are you sure? Are you sure you wouldn't make money? Are you absolutely sure? When Exodus, a movie about Egypt, cast people who look nothing like Egyptians, director Ridley Scott said, "I can't mount a film of this budget where I have to rely on tax rebates in Spain and say that my lead actor is Mohammed so-and-so from such and such." That's critically acclaimed and commercially respected director Ridley Scott claiming that people wouldn't give him money if he had cast a darker-skinned actor. Which, not only is this mind-numbingly racist, it's also just flat out wrong. When I interviewed Brooklyn-based Japanese actress Mari Uchida, she told me about the time she was denied a role as a Japanese character. She said, "I auditioned for a Japanese period piece and got really great feedback about my audition tape. In the end, I did not book the job, and my agents told me that it was because I looked too contemporary, and therefore followed it up with asking me to dye my hair back to my natural black color, because it would make me more marketable. Then it hit me. They wanted me, really, to look more Japanese to book the Japanese roles, because my 100% Japanese heritage and birthplace and passport was just not enough to book a Japanese role. I had to deepen my Japaneseness, which really made me feel like my identity was being decided on by people who weren't me." It's that last part that I want to focus in on, that she felt like her identity was being decided on by people that weren't her. When Hollywood is given the opportunity to book a POC actor for a POC role, they choose to cast a white actor instead, and when they do decide to actually cast a POC actress, in the case of Mari, they told her she wasn't ethnic enough. People of color can't catch a break, and that's why it is so important that movies like Black Panther and Crazy Rich Asians and Searching do well. Hollywood needs to understand that people will pay to see themselves represented on the big screen, which leads me to my final point. This article by Independent found that people who live in ethnically diverse streets are less racially prejudiced than individuals living in highly segregated areas, and their increased tolerance is due directly to the experience of a more integrated society, a study has found. Even when white people have little interaction with other groups living in the same ethnically diverse community, they feel more tolerant towards them purely because they witness positive interactions between different racial groups, it discovered. So, just being surrounded by diversity makes you less racist. And the opposite can be said too. The less exposure you have to diversity, the more racist you become. Now, I'm not about to suggest you pack up your house and move to a racially heterogeneous environment, but you can do the next best thing. Invite diversity into your homes, via your screens. Less exposure to minorities means more racism, which means Hollywood won't want to cast minorities in the hopes that you'll watch their movies. Miscasting causes racism, causes miscasting, causes racism, and on the circle goes. But the film industry is a business, and like all businesses, their one and only goal are their profits. And if we deny them that goal, they'll have no choice but to listen to us. So break the cycle. Pay for the movies that have positive representations for all ethnicities. Vote with your wallets. Let Hollywood know that power resides not in the executives, but in their audience.